This is not a test. Stay calm in an orderly fashion. Make your way to the lifeboats.
Mayday, the ship is sinking.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Lifeboat Addiction Recovery Cast. This is Wednesday, which means we are talking a little bit about meditations, recovery-related questions, what's going on with us, how our jobs are going, and just our overall processes throughout the week. So with that being said, Hunter, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm sure it's becoming a recurring theme because I say it about every time you ask me how I'm doing, and I say I've been busy. This has been a busy week. This has been a busy month, and it seems to keep happening. But I'm really starting to dig the busyness. I'm starting to it's giving me really good purpose. It's giving me good motivation. It's getting me to I don't have time later in the day to do these things. So what do I need to do? Okay, I'm going to get up earlier. And it's starting to motivate me to make more changes in my life to accommodate that schedule. And I'm really enjoying that. What's yourself? How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. I mean, all things considered, I just had a baby, so that's a big thing. Everything's going fairly swimmingly. Right now, a lot of stuff that I have going on is more or less in my personal life. It's not necessarily in my professional life. My professional life is just kind of, I got a lot of boxes that I got to check at any given day. Like, did I get that done? Did I get that done? Did I get that done? So it's always about forward momentum. But in my personal life, I got, daddy things that I need to do. I need to make sure that the baby's changed. I need to give my wife plenty enough sleep, which I think she has. I'm giving her, I try to give her a couple hours worth of nap every day. So, and I'm taking every other night with baby Jonah, as it were. But, even in other parts of my personal life, for those of you who have been listening for a little while now, you may know that I'm a pastor. I'm not a pastor. I'm a lay preacher rather, but I'm deeply involved in my religious community. There's just a lot of things going on with that. There's a lot of things going on with in what I would consider my faith walk, kind of challenging new ground, which is really exciting. But I'm seeing a lot of things happen, I guess, in the overall denomination that I'm associated with, which is Presbyterian United States, that some things I agree with, some things I strongly disagree with. And it's a really interesting point for me because I'm having to think about things in my faith related to macro level politics for kind of the first time. A lot of times, I think in early recovery, especially for myself and what I've seen helping the many, many recoveries that I have over the years, is it's all micro level. It's all what am I doing for myself today on my faith journey? And I'm doing that, but at the same time, having to kind of have a head on a swivel and look at okay, big picture things. These things affect a lot of people and a lot of people's perspectives about faith and how we're moving forward. So I'm having to do quite a lot of talking and stuff around that, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think it's always, I like something you said. It's interesting when you start to look at it in the political sphere of all these different aspects and the bigger picture stuff, which I really dislike looking at things that way. I think we've talked about that a little bit. It's just even in our job field, right? It's who can I help? What can I do to strengthen my recovery today? And what can I do to help somebody else struggling with addiction? What pathway can I provide? Where our upper management, they're dealing with the politics, the grants, the funding.
Man, I think you hit it. You once again, you hit it right down the middle, which, the truth be told, when we talk about the recovery community, when we talk about recovery communities and the recovery movement, the unfortunate truth that we seldom talk about is there are two levels. There is the kind of the base level, which is rah, rah, sis, boom, bah, let's go, recovery, let's go do the walks, let's advocate, let's go and do the classes and go do the speaking and all that kind of stuff. And then there is the politics, which is we have to have a lobbyist in, the state legislature because we need to be talking to our politicians about dude, we need more money coming down because we're helping these people, but with budgetary cuts, you're going to start seeing this statistic of overdoses start to tick up. There's a lot of other metrics that all of a sudden come into play. So I think that's something, I know we don't talk about it that much in class, but it's something that we certainly have talked about, which I implore my recoveries and my recovery coaches to really explore, the positivity side and being with recoveries and have that be your focus, but understand that there's people over you and there's people in management positions that have other focuses than you. And I think a lot of times, maybe we can springboard into this a little bit. I see a lot of recoveries that are working as some form of in a recovery facilitating service as a coach or something along that line. that because they don't get that, they immediately make it out that the person above them's the bad guy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's a struggle for me because it's like I am the first one to believe that people do things usually for a good purpose. Not everybody, but generally people are trying to do the right thing. And a lot of times people fall through the cracks, or they're only seeing like 1% of one side that, you know, if they looked at the bigger picture, they're like, oh, that's why we have to do that. Because they're seeing like, well, this guy is struggling in the hospital that he just OD'd. And then I'm now being told that I can't transport him to treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what you don't see is the agency doesn't have you covered under insurance to be able to do that. And there's a lot of liabilities that come into play, not only for you, but possibly the hospital that you're transporting for and for the company and the individual. And there's a lot of different things here. And then they kind of throw it to the wind, caution to the wind, and say like, well, you know, liabilities out the door, or liabilities be damned, I'm going to help somebody with recovery. And it's like, I love the fire in your stomach that is wanting that.
Mm-hmm.
And I 100% agree. At the same time, you have to understand that we live in a world that has certain metrics that have to be followed. And if we don't follow those things, a lot of people can get hurt in a very quick hurry. And trust me when I say not all of it relies on your head, because we've seen people that they think, well, if I do this, it's only going to affect me. And then who does it affect? It affects them. It affects their recovery. It affects their recovery's family. It affects their agency. It affects all these other entities that they were completely blind to.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm struggling with that as of lately.
I'll say this, from what I'm hearing you say and what I've experienced and seen in this field, and not even just in this field, it happens with recoveries inside of programs as well. Like looking at staff members of programs and things, it's that we have a tendency, and this may land wrong because it might sound a little bit snippy, but like judging in ignorance. And that's what I see a lot. Cause like, I'm glad that when I started working for you, you kind of told me like, if I tell you you can't work with a client, or if I tell you you can't transport a client, there's a reason for it. You don't have to know that reason necessarily, but there is a reason why I'm saying that.
Yeah, it has usually, and I see too many people, and I know you have too, where they believe that somehow it's because of some personal animus against an individual. Right. They believe like, you don't like them, or no, you just have it against me because I did something like, it's like, no, like there's a whole laundry list of reasons why I might be saying something, or that this outcome might be this way. And many of which you either don't know or are not privy to know. And that's one thing I think a lot of people have a struggle with working in this field, is like, sometimes you are told that you can't do something, and then you're not given the reason why. And you immediately make it about ego. You make it about like, they just don't want to, or they're just all about the money, and it's just like, dude, gal, whoever you are, you don't know what you don't know. So you better get off it, because there's things here that there's things in motion in that play that I have no control over. I'm just telling you the outcome. And if you choose to press against the outcome, I can't control what's going to happen to you. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of the time why I'm saying something is like, the reason I say no a lot of the time is solely with, I can't control the outcome. So no. Mm-hmm. Because if I can control the outcome, then I can mitigate damage. If something happens that is not good, but I can generally control the outcome, then, you know, there's going to be things there that, you know, yeah, people may have to struggle, and yeah, people might get a slap on the hand, but that's what they'll get instead of, you know, a felony, or instead of serious problems, you know, being arrested and stuff like that. So
yeah, it's just that, like I said, judging in ignorance. We want to come up with an answer, and if we can't decide what that answer is, or we're not told that answer, it's immediately got to go to, well, it's something personal, because there's no logical answer I know that makes this the way it is. And like I said, I don't think that's just like, I know you're talking about people in the field, but that's so pertinent, I think, in everybody's life. You know, let's talk about people in programs. I've seen this. I actually just dealt with it today during one of my classes, where a attendee was mad because of a way a staff member handled the situation.
Keep going.
And that's what we see all the time. We see people like, or at least I see it all the time inside of programs, is like, they handled the situation, or they wouldn't let me do this thing. So it's personal. They're spiteful against me. They have a problem with me. They're on a power trip. And it's like, no, it's because that's breaking the law, and you just don't know it. Or that's breaking a rule, and you just don't know it.
That rule is to prevent you from breaking the law.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think, dude, you just hit, you know, pay dirt. I think it does come down to ego. Mm-hmm. Like, I think, and that's what I think this podcast today should really be about, is ego? Like ego. Like, what happens when ego gets in the way as a recovery coach, as somebody that thinks that they know better?
Well, I can tell you all about it because I know everything about everything.
But how many times in any given day do we deal with ego?
Every day, multiple times a day. I deal with it in my own life. I deal with it with my clients. I deal with it with everything. And I'm saying I go to meetings and I see it. It's that it shows its head in so many different ways, though. That's what makes it kind of tricky. Is there's never like one way where ego is going to come at you every day. You know, sometimes I see it in the client who knows what's best for them and they know the pathway to sobriety. Even though they've had no luck with it in the past, they know exactly what needs to happen. And they know better than anybody else is telling them that they're about to run into something bad.
Well, and isn't that the most difficult part? Because we do believe in that multiple pathways model. We have this continual, we have this sense in it of like, all right, like, well, he can try it, but like full knowing, just like you said, like there's a train coming with your name on it. You might want to jump off the tracks. Because I know you dealt with that today.
Yeah. And I mean, there is a point where you get honest. I mean, I will say I'm not so much in the multiple pathways where someone tells me that they're going to use meth to get off heroin. I'm going to say that's a good idea. I believe in multiple pathways, but I also don't believe in letting people completely run off the side of a cliff.
Sure.
So there's a conversation to be had. Like, are you sure that that's the path you want to take? Like, are you sure?
Mm-hmm.
You know? But it does come down where our hands are tied sometimes, especially when at a point where a client's like, it got that ego going on and they have that, like, I know what's best and I'm going to do this. There's really nothing I can say. There's no changing the mind. You're a grown adult and you've made a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And what I say is literally everything that's coming in is yeah, but I can do it this way. And it's like, well, no, you can't. Well, yeah, but and it's like at that point, mine's made up.
Well, and I think anybody who stumbles across this or anybody who's listening to this, that is one of the number one defeaters of recovery is the ego. The ego it becomes a machine and it becomes an absolute bull in a china shop. Mm-hmm. We've seen it too many times where the individual believes like, I know best for what is for me and I can't be told a darn lick of a thing. And then they take things too personally. We tell them like, you sure you want to try that? Or this might be the outcome. And they immediately, they stomp it down and say, yeah, but yeah, that's not going to be outcome. Or I know. It's like, we've tried this rodeo 50 times and you've gotten stung by the bull all 50 times. What are we going to, do we not see a pattern of behavior here? And they continue, yeah, but. And it's like, what is it going to take? Because the people that tend to have large egos, they say that the higher the height, the longer the fall or the worse the fall. It's like, dude, if you have such an ego that you're not seeing some of the huge disparities in front of you of, I don't have a home, I don't have any job prospects, I'm just waking up and seeking the next hit of my drug of choice. You don't realize like whatever's coming, if you still have ego, then it's going to be a problem for you because the thing that humbles you may kill you, literally, figuratively for sure, but literally very possibly.
Yeah, I will say absolutely. I think ego has a place. I want to put that caveat, like ego in the form of confidence, right? So like, I'm confident in my recovery. I'm confident that there's no going back to drugs for me. That's not an option. I'm confident in that. But I'm also there's that healthy lies, but there's also the other side, which is once I decide that no longer does anyone have a place to speak to me because I'm high and mighty and above them, and they can't speak into my life because I already have this figured out, danger zone. It's like I can be
danger zone.
Is that a movie reference or something?
Well, don't worry about it.
Okay.
For those of you who don't understand, Hunter's a little bit younger. He doesn't know about that Top Gun life.
Okay, I'll just mind business. But yeah, once ego flares up to the point to where people can no longer have a voice in your life because you already know the answer, that's where it becomes dangerous. You can know the answer, but always be open to hearing some criticism on it or what might be a better path or why that might not be the best idea.
Yes. And I think of a perfect example that I heard a recovery bring up today about a situation that was happening inside of different meetings that they were approaching where, because of COVID, certain meeting guidelines have really been restructured and changed. And I'm not going to out anybody by any means, and I'm going to kind of use somewhat extrapolated language so that, there can be no real identifiers. But essentially what was happening was there were a great deal of meetings that were being, for lack of a better term, taken over because it was a matter of like, well, if there's a place where like we can run meetings, but we can't really run these meetings anymore. Or there's a place where we run meetings, but they're all in the same place. And it's created a power differential inside of some other recovery's hands. And they started getting, a lot of people started getting offended. There was a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of chaos. And it's like, that's what we're seeing all over the place in the recovery community now because of COVID. COVID has changed things. It's forced people to be very uncomfortable. It's forced people into positions that they don't want to be in. And it's forced people into positions where normally like they look at it and say, if I had the choice, I wouldn't be doing this right now. But now that we've been doing this for, oh my gosh, almost a year now, like I want to change it, but I don't know how to go about it. And I think we're seeing a lot of people, at least in the recovery community around Lansing, that are struggling with serious ego, that are struggling with like, don't you know who I am? I used to be the big dog. I used to hold meetings that had 30, 40, 50 people in it at any given time. And now they're being told like, well, you don't have a meeting anymore. So why should we listen to you? And it's like, good. COVID has brought out the worst in some people. I'll tell you that.
I've seen that too. Yeah. Where like all of a sudden that, if you have people who have found their identity inside of an outside enterprise of any sort, and then that was all of a sudden taken away during COVID. I've seen that a lot where people have gone from being a top dog to nothing. Good, bad, indifferent, I don't know. But I've noticed that where like that identifier has been taken away. I feel like it's actually caused a lot of problems with recoveries in the field, or not in the field, but recoveries in recovery, I guess. Recovery being a person in recovery, the thing. In case you were confused.
In case you were wondering.
Yeah. But I've noticed like that identifier thing going away. It's caused a lot of issues. It's caused a lot of identification problems for the person. And I think that's good and bad. Because I've seen people whose like total identity is in who they are at a meeting. It's who they are in the recovery community, but they have no insight into who they actually are. And I've seen some people break under that pressure. And some people flourish. Like, who am I when I'm by myself? Who's the real me, and that's a hard thing to face. It can either be the death or life of somebody.
Well, and I think that gets down into another avenue that we probably should explore is like, how does an individual come to know themselves? Like, I know that we can give the generic answer of like, well, it's different for everybody else, but I think that there's some commonality across the board of the way that people have to explore things. Like, first and foremost, let me preface this conversation. We're not medical doctors. We can't give medical advice. We don't know. We're two recoveries that a lot of times, it's a concept of like, I need help with something, and it's something that's obvious that anybody could look at it and be like, oh, this is all you have to do. And then Connor comes in and is like, well, I don't know either. And that's a lot of where we're at sometimes. It's like, I don't know. He doesn't know. Then the world doesn't know. And meanwhile, there's 30 people behind us that are like, hey, yeah, idiots, if you just tried this, that would work. So let me preface this conversation with that. But I think all in all, what I'm seeing continually in the recovery community is a lack of honesty. And we've talked about this a million times, but we've talked about it once. The people have to start getting honest with themselves, with each other, with how they're approaching this thing, because we're seeing COVID and, people, there's reports now that they're talking about possibly not until like next Thanksgiving that this thing is going to be up. So you're talking about another summer. So who knows? I don't know. But we all need to start getting really clear about what we want and how the recovery community is going to continue to evolve and thrive, because what we're seeing right now is it becoming pocketed. There's easily 50 to 60 meetings in Lansing that are no longer meeting and possibly have no more expectation of ever meeting again because COVID.
Probably not that many not meeting again, but probably postponed. I think most of them have hopes of opening back up.
Well, I think they have hopes, but what's the reality? There's hopes versus like, you've now been out of but you've now been out of the game for a year now. Do you think you're just going to turn the lights back on? Everybody's going to show up? Like, and not only that, one of the big problems we're seeing is meeting spaces. How's that going to change? What's that going to look like? What happens when the group that, used to have 30 people in it now has 3?
Right.
So
yeah, there is some stuff there. So I take it we're back. We're on the topic of being honest in the recovery community. So honestly, where it comes from here, it's real hard to say, I mean, if we want to be honest, it's like, where does the recovery community go from here? Does it go, it's not going to go back to what it was. I don't think right away. It's not going to be like the big recovery booming enterprise that we saw here in Lansing. Like, I don't care where you were. If you wanted to go to a meeting, you could go to a meeting pretty much all day, every day.
Yeah, almost any time, barring like 1:00 in the morning.
Yeah, but it was like there was stuff going on, and it was nice. I don't think we're going to get back to that right away. I feel like some of these meetings, like some of them, I know of a few that aren't really planning on reopening their doors that I'm aware of. But most of them, as long as I would say as long as the home group members are still doing good, the people who are going to that meeting consistently are still on top of it, that they will get back into meeting regularly because they're going to plug back into their original group. There's a reason they like that group. We've also seen a lot of people fall away because of COVID. So that's another kind of hard reality, is like how prominent is that inside of the 12-step programs and stuff like that. And then, like you said, the space too. How long are these restrictions going to go on of how many people can be in a room together?
Well, and I there's a fantasy of mine, and I could be way off, but I think hopefully like this, the restrictions, the lockdown, COVID's over, and then we get on the other side of it. And it's somewhat of the Brave New World mentality of like nobody quite knows, because I don't know if you agree with me on this or not. I think it's a conversation worth having, so that's why I'm bringing it up. But I don't see the world going back to how it was. I mean, that's the conversation we've had before. I don't think that all of a sudden it's going to be like this miraculous, like, you know, they're going to lift the storm shutters and we're all going to go out and like it's going to be blinded by the sun and like, oh my gosh. Oh, we made the storm and we're finally through it, and let us get back to real life. And it's like, I don't see it. I don't see it happening. I think that there's just too much has changed to allow that to happen again.
Yeah, let me like preface this with, I'm going to speak in my ignorance to a certain degree, because there's a lot of things about this that I don't quite comprehend on like a political level and like economic levels and things like that. But I would agree with you. I don't think that we're going to go back to what it was before. I think that this has been a changing experience for, at least I don't really know what's going on in other countries as much, but at least in the United States and what I'm seeing personally, it's been a really changing experience for a lot of people, which I'm kind of scared about that. In the sense of, I'm going to keep this centered on recovery. So on the sense of recoveries, I know I'm really good at making excuses and justifications and things like that. So that's my scare, is that there'll be a lot of self-rationalizations. Like I've seen it now, and I know I'm going to see it when we open back up or when things start to go back to being closer to what they used to be. Because even now I'm seeing it like, well, because of COVID is why I relapsed, or because of COVID is why I'm not going to meetings. And
I don't know how to feel about that, man.
I know how to feel about it.
I hear it, and it's like, out of all the excuses in modern history that there has ever been to relapse, that has to be the top bill.
Yeah, and this will probably give me some kickback. I don't think there is ever a justifiable reason to go back to using.
I agree.
And yeah, that may be very controversial, because like, yeah, it's been a really hard time. It's been hard for a lot of people.
People have lost their jobs, their livelihoods, their entire
support.
being. Some loved ones that have died because of the disease.
But that is kind of what like the beautiful thing of recovery is there's nothing, again, ever, nothing, not a single thing that has to make you go back to using. So I will say that it makes a very good reason for somebody to make a bad decision. And I hear it said in meetings all the time, is I got to remember how to say it, but like basically I can pick any bad or any good reason to make a good justification, or a good justification to make a bad decision or something like that. You know, basically I can take anything and justify it to make my using applicable.
Sure. And that's, I mean, I get that. I think that's completely true, but I also think like, you know, there's been my biggest struggle, and I'm very fortunate. I'm very blessed. There's been a lot through this process that it's like my life has grown in abundance since this has happened, whether it be my family or my career or whatever. But I know that there's many people where it's like things happen to them and then they have no outlet. And then they're told, go to a meeting. Like, what do you mean? Go to a meeting online, go to in the rooms. And it's just like, that's not the same. It's not the same to have that contact, to be able to talk. And then all of a sudden somebody that you don't know them, they're just a face on a wall somewhere, just hits mute. You're muted. You can't talk now. Okay. I'm going to shut off your camera. Like, you know, I guess it's just a really weird place that we find ourselves in, where it's like, how do we navigate this forward as recoveries?
In one of my classes, we say, if one method doesn't work, try something else, and never give up. I love getting that right every time, because it's very true, right? So we have to find something that works for us. So if one way of our coping, this is why I've heard it said multiple times, people who have multiple pathways of recovery, multiple support systems, are less likely to face a relapse.
Sure.
Because if one thing falls away, we still have something else. Put as many barriers between you and relapse as you can. But when you notice something isn't there, so like for me, I like meetings. If I was not able to go to meetings, I would do something else. Like one time I was struggling and I literally, there was no meetings going on. I don't know if there was or not. It was late at night and I was struggling, you know, I was having some thoughts that weren't okay for me to have. I was dealing with some emotions that I didn't really know what to do with. And I went to a buddy's house. I called up my buddy and I was like, hey, I'm going to come over to your place and I need somebody to talk to for a bit. And he was like, sure. And me and him and his roommate sat there and talked for about 3 hours. We read some out of the big book. We talked about the thoughts I was having. They're like, yeah, I've had those thoughts too. And I got the same experience that I'm able to get in meetings. And I got the same clarity and understanding of my feelings and what I was going through that I would get through that. I also have a sponsor that I can call. I have friends that I can call. And if you don't have no sponsor and friends, you haven't made that relationship yet, reach out to a therapist, reach out to a peer recovery coach. You know, they might not be able to tell you like the same thing. They're not going to treat you the same as a friend does because they're professionals, but they're going to help you through that stuff the same way.
Sure.
You know, there's always another avenue, something we can grab onto that might just give us that ray of hope. It's a matter of which is closer to us right now. Is it the using or is it reaching out?
Yeah. And I agree wholeheartedly. I do think that, you know, we do have to create multiple avenues. We have to diversify our utility belt or however you want to call our recovery capital. There's a lot of different, you know, terminologies for it, but we have to continually diversify. I guess I'm just looking at, you know, where do we go from here? Because I have not met one agency or one entity yet that has made the statement, well, when we go back to real life, we're going to be done with the internet. Because I've heard too many people say, no, like we're going to keep whatever we're doing.
I hope my classes stay via Zoom.
Like,
some of them, it's kind of nice.
Yeah. It's like, we're going to keep this, we're going to do it like this. And it's like, well, okay, so we've identified the new epoch of recovery. We are now going to a hybrid model. There wasn't really a hybrid model before. Now, that's not to say that in the rooms there was recovery was being utilized in the internet and online and in different platforms and stuff before addiction or not addiction, but before COVID. Sure. But now we're in such a place where it's like, more than most of the population that is in recovery right now is utilizing some form of platform or some form of computer for their recovery necessities and tools. What do we do going forward? What does it look like when, you know, I want to have a meeting, but it's like, well, is the meeting hybrid? Well, no, the meeting's not hybrid. It's going to be in person. I think that there will be a lot of people that's like, well, I don't want to go to it if it's not a hybrid because I got too much of a busy work day. We talk about this like in regards to religion and stuff like that, where I think that I fear that there's a level of complacency that people aren't recognizing, that they're saying things like you just said, my class is so convenient online. I prefer not to do it in person. Why? Because it's convenient this way. I can just pop open the laptop, do it right here. It's like, okay, what does that look like though in supplementing your recovery? Because I think that there's going to be a lot of people that end up, you know, finding that. And I think that's fine. I think that they'll find it and they'll be able to mesh with that. Well, let's go to the extreme. What does it look like when somebody is mandated by the courts? To go to
signed or
and they need to get their sheet signed. And they're like, well, I'll just go to the online. They're like, no, you go in person. It's like, who's doing in person now? Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
So there's like this really weird, I think once again, we have entered the new epoch of recovery. We just haven't identified what does that look like.
So we were talking about this before, and I this is kind of what I don't know what it's going to look like. I can't really answer that. But what I can speak on is we talked about the uncomfortability and growth in that uncomfortability. I feel like that might be the time we're in with the recovery field right now. And that's I think we're on the next, we talked about like the next step of the recovery community might be coming up very quickly. That next, like moving to a different level. So this could be a very beneficial thing.
Sure.
It could, maybe we do have hybrid meetings going on now. Maybe we do have some in person, some online, a lot more online meetings. People know how to get on the online meetings. People know how to run hybrid meetings with people there and people on the screen. And we've learned how to do these things because we were forced into an uncomfortable situation where we were forced to learn those things if we wanted to continue with some sense of normalcy, some sense of what we've had to maintain our recovery till now. So just like now, I mean, yeah, I'd rather teach my classes via Zoom, because I can hop on, teach a class via Zoom, and then get on with a client and then teach another class. And then I don't have to drive here or there and do that. So there's like, yeah, it's convenient, but it's also, it gets me more in. So like maybe if I'm in recovery and I can't get to a meeting, I can still get to a meeting. You know, I can't drive to a meeting because I don't have my car right now, but I can still get on a meeting online. and check in and still see all the same people that I'm used to seeing. So maybe there is some benefit to this, as well as there might be some complacency. There might be some things that are like might keep us stuck where we're at right now instead of like getting back to normal. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. maybe there's a good and every evil sort of thing in this, you know?
Well, and I think it's a very fair assessment. You know, is the possibility that there is a lot of good to be done here. Like, I don't know if it's going to happen right now, but I definitely could see them doing like VR chats into AA meetings. So basically, taking the place of an AA meeting, you just put on some goggles and you're in a room. Yeah, and you're in a room all of a sudden. You're in a room with another bunch of people that are wearing goggles. It's like, is that where we're going in our society? Is that what's new? Is that what's upcoming? And I was like, yeah, I think that could definitely be.
But I feel like one of those old people on the cartoons right now, because I'm like, that kind of frightens me.
Well, it's like,
technology is
really?
Frightening.
Yeah. But yeah, little kid on the back of the Simpsons bus. I'm in danger. But no, I continually wonder, and speculation is only worth so much, but it's like, I think if you can identify underlying mechanisms, you can speculate pretty accurately what's going to happen next. It's the domino effect. If you know that this domino will tick and this domino will tick and this domino will tick, you probably know that this domino way down here will tick. So then you just start guessing, okay, what are the dominoes in between this one and this one? But I definitely see that there will be a lot of innovation in internet. I know that, let me give you an example. For us, one of our funding sources this last year, or I'll go back even further. So from 2019, the way that our funding sources work, it goes from October to October. In 2019, we had X amount of hours that we had to do with face-to-face in recovery or in recovery implemented works. And it was like 700 hours face-to-face. Okay. Well, COVID hits March of 2020, which means that everything goes upside down, topsy-turvy. Everything goes crazy. And then it is a full-on fight and struggle for agencies to make their 700 hours. And it comes out in the wash that at the very end of it, only 3 agencies out of who knows how many, a lot. And I'm talking about 3 figures, a lot of agencies. Only 3 of them actually end up making their quota. So what do they do next? They say, well, the next set, so 2021 or 2020 to 2021 will give you 350 to 375 hours, but it can be hybrid, which means it can be in person or it can be online. The reason I'm bringing this up is like, okay, what's the future of this? Like that's a major funding source. Is that what's going to happen statewide? Is that what's going to happen all over the country? Is like from now on, we are going to have a hybrid option? Because here's the truth. Much of the recovery community, a lot of it is grassroots, AA, NA, smart recovery, all that kind of stuff. A lot of it's grassroots, but without a foundational backbone inside of the human services field, where people are going to get degrees to do case management, where people are going to get funding to run agencies that can hire people to become recovery coaches. Without things like that, I don't know if the recovery community, the recovery movement as it stands today exists. I don't think it does. And I could be completely wrong about that. I think that there is a way for it to be like the recovery movement as a whole, either nationally or globally, can move forward without having some form of state funding. But I don't think it could be as powerful or do as much by any means as it does now without there being some form of funding from the government, without the government saying in some way, shape, or form, like, here's an allotment of money, go and make a change in this statistic. I don't know. What do you think?
You lost me when you brought up funding sources. Like I said, micro level. But no, I mean, so it depends on where you're looking at it from. Yeah. So like where you're talking about with state funding, of course, like state funded therapies, state funded PRCs, like we're state funded, right? Yep. So we work. I don't bill insurance for work, the work I do. So that's because I got funding from the state. So if state funding goes away, of course, my job is going to become a whole lot more difficult with clientele. And then we have the other side, like NA, AA, smart recovery, things like that. Those will continue to progress. I believe that because they, like you said, they're grassroots, they're self-sustaining based on the contributions of the members there. They don't accept outside donations. They don't accept government funding or anything like that. So I think they have a very big, or as far as I know NA and AA and like refuge recovery. I don't know about like smart recovery and what they do, but I do know that at least those organizations don't accept outside funding sources.
Mhm.
So they can continue to flourish.
Yes.
But as far as like, if you're going to go to like a state funded therapy or something like that, or if you don't have insurance, you need a block grant, if that stuff goes away, that would be very big danger. People would lose that's one thing I like about Michigan is they have such a support network here that's easily accessible. And usually there's not that many barriers between somebody getting services, even if they don't have the insurance or the qualification on that note. So if that goes away, yeah, I mean, people lost a huge amount of support.
Well, and I guess, you have to look at recovery in some part as kind of an amorphous blob, as like it's just dropped down and it goes into the crevices and cracks that are open to it. And then there's new avenues that are explored. And one of the problems is, and this is the archetypal problem. So for those of you who are listening, this is what I like to talk about. I like to talk about the macro and kind of the depth of it. Like, let's get to bottom brass tacks. This is the problem with the system. The system in its totality has created avenues that recovery as a whole in many ways has become codependent on. So recovery as we see it today has taken the shape that it has because it's had these certain systems to support it, versus if these systems worked here, recovery would probably look differently. I'll give you an example. The guy that goes into treatment and he goes, how does he get into treatment? Because publicly funded dollars, he's allowed to go to treatment. So he goes to treatment, and then after treatment, he is still a little wobbly. So what does he want to do? He wants to go to 3/4 housing or halfway house. He wants to go and get some support that's a little bit longer. So what does he do? He goes to, a 3-month or a year-long halfway house, support house. And while he's there, he is surrounded by a community of recovery. There's people there that, are speaking the same language of him, recovery ease, if you will. He is going to meetings. He has requirements. She has requirements, whatever. Their recovery is being built upon this foundation of like, I've had support from A to Z. I've had support in going, when I OD'd and went to the hospital, from the hospital, I went into treatment. From treatment, I went into the recovery support housing. From the recovery support housing, they helped me towards my end stay there after a year long. I now have a year in recovery. I have stability around me. I got these meetings. I got these sponsors. I got these people in my life. And that person's recovery is based in large part upon this avenue. And what has ended up happening is recovery, the blob known as recovery over time, has taken advantage of those pillars. How many people, and this is just an example, how many people that in NA have been to treatment?
Quite a few of them, all of them, really.
Good portion.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe not all, but
almost everybody that I've talked to in there has gone to some form of treatment facility, and that's where they originally got clean. Okay, and now out of those people, generally, how many people end up at some form of sober living house? Quite a few. I would say like half of them, something like that. People staying in sober living houses.
It's not necessarily for a long time, and granted, we run in different communities, so it's probably a little bit higher than normal, right? Okay, so what does it look like? Because those things, those metrics were based upon state funding. What does it look like when state funding changes what those look like for that recovery as a whole? Because just as you said, you met those people in NA meetings.
Right.
It's like, well, why did they come to the NA meeting in the first place?
Because they were forced to from recovery housing.
At first, maybe, or because, they found enough stability that they were able to go to the NA meeting, and that the recovery movement, whether it be NA, whether it be AA and all that kind of stuff, this is going to be a little bit controversial, right? So, controversy. Here comes the warning, here it comes, that a lot of those things, they are not dependent on outside entities. The AA meeting, not dependent on outside entities. It's completely enclosed. NA, same thing, completely enclosed within itself. Self-sustaining, that's the name of the game. However, a lot of the people that go to these things are not self-sustaining. They are there because of a different reason. They are there because you essentially have many of the AA and NA meetings that will be around for a long time. I'm not saying that they're going to be completely wiped out, not by any means. They've been here before treatment. They're going to be here after treatment, right? So they'll be here. But I think, once again, we're in an epoch where things are going to change. The example that I give is, okay, they're limiting treatment here in Michigan, at least. And we're seeing this happen more than likely on a federal level, where what used to be like, the classic model, somebody goes into treatment and they walk out of treatment, or they go to treatment and then they lapse, they go to treatment for 21 days, 30 days, then they lapse afterwards, they go straight back into treatment, and they go a couple of times to get it going. What happens if they're only allowed to go once in a year?
Right.
That's a problem. What happens if the, their insurance only pays for a couple months of their stay in
Well, we're already
sober living.
We're seeing that part already, where the Medicaid isn't covering housing as long. I think it's within a certain, right now the way I have it qualified is in a certain amount of time after leaving treatment, they will pay for like 3 months stay.
Mhm.
And that's different than how it used to be from my understanding. And that's it's problematic. And I've seen that problem come up for some people.
So because trickle down,
Mhm.
not to, I'm really not trying to quote, George Bush economics or anything like that, but trickle down recovery effect, which is, okay, so this is happening. What's that going to look like for meetings? What's that going to look like for other entities? Because if they think that it's not going to affect those things, you're wrong.
Yeah.
It
So
will.
I guess when there has to be some form of something else that has to happen. I'm trying to think of the right word, but basically like, okay, so this problem might address itself and we might see it coming down the line. So like something has to be done. Right. So I think
And once again, I'm just saying we see 1, 2, and 3 dominoes and we see a domino way down here. So it's like, let's make some conclusions here. And here's the thing. Once again, I prefaced it with, we're ignoramuses. Don't listen to us. We don't know what we're talking about half the time. We're just looking at what we're seeing and saying like, what's happening here? Is anybody else seeing this kind of meerkat mentality? I'm sorry. So go ahead and go.
Yeah. So I don't know if meetings will be affected that terribly. I definitely think the recovery community and the professional standpoint will be affected pretty significantly.
If you had to guess how.
I mean, just what we're seeing, we're already kind of seeing it right now, where we're seeing the state funding start to trickle away a little bit. We're starting to see cutbacks in block grants. We're seeing people's funding getting cut back. And that's just what we're seeing right now. So that, I don't think that gets any better because our economy is not exactly booming right now. With the whole, coronavirus lockdowns, all that stuff happening, our economy is taking quite the hit.
Well, and that's not to mention the other nasty thing that has started to happen, which is larger entities, the law of gravity, larger entities taking on more mass, where it's, you have smaller outfit agencies that hire recovery coaches or whatever are becoming more and more niche, and any type of federal funding that's being trickled down is being networked into the biggest agencies. It's being networked into the biggest things. And it's not because they do the best. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they do.
More inclusive,
but
they have more services.
But the money's being trickled in because it's like, well, okay, here you go. And then you have small kind of cut like a knife outfits that are struggling. So anyways, keep going.
Yeah. That would be my guess of like, it's going to affect the recovery community. NA might take a hit because some of the people might not be getting pushed in there as much. Recovery might not be as prominent as it is right now. It might be like what we see in Iowa. In Iowa, there is literally, I've talked about this before, there's literally, as far as I know, one rehabilitation center in Iowa. That is as far as I know. And Medicaid covers you, I think, up to 21 days to stay there. I believe that's the only one I know of. And so that's all they have for a treatment facility there. That might be what we start to see here. We start to see some of these treatment facilities no longer getting the funding. So we start seeing them drop off, and there's now 1-2 options instead of the 50 that we have right now. So recovery might not be as booming as it is right now. So NA could take a hit, or NA 12-step, I don't care, groups might take a hit, or they might see massive growth because people might kind of look for help that way.
I'm hoping that's the case. I'm hoping it's the inverse effect.
Yeah,
people end up flocking to these things because it's the only avenue.
It's the only affordable avenue right now.
I pray that's the case, because that would be phenomenal. Because then we're back at grassroots, and then it's like, the world's the oyster at this point. Let's make it happen.
Right, and I think and that's the thing is like these programs are highly effective at helping people not use substances if they're stuck to. That's been proven time and time again. The numbers don't lie. And I mean, you'll hear it said in meetings, it's not, there's no statistics behind it. It's anybody who will fully give themselves over to this program will not use again. And quite frankly, one of the parts of the program is not using again. So if you give yourself fully over to it, you're probably not going to use again, because that is part of giving yourself fully to it. Controversy.
Yeah, controversy.
But I mean, that's my take on it. So I guess I don't know. This whole thing, when we start talking about politics and we start talking about funding and we start talking about this, I can see things happening and like I'm fully aware of it, but I don't know exactly what that means for the recovery community. Either we're going to thrive and we're going to overcome it. Things might start to, our economy might start to come back a little bit. We might start seeing where these block grant fundings are coming back in. We're starting to see things trickle back down, or we might see the opposite where it continues in the direction it's going right now, which means, I'm in trouble.
But I get where you're coming from, because we agreed that when we started this podcast, like we wouldn't get hyper political, and I don't think we have. But it's a matter of, I think it's important for the recovery community to be self-aware. I mean, we talk about this all the time, holding up the living mirror. And I think that the macro level recovery community is not self-aware enough. It is in many ways, not by any means all of it, but in many ways it's too siloed. You have people saying AA over here, NA over here, and we're busy talking about multiple pathways, but multiple pathways in some way can be somewhat siloing too. Like, well, it's all multiple, everything goes, right? Not everything, but you know what I mean?
Right.
So but I believe that it's like, why are we not standing up? Why are we not having a meeting of the minds? Why are we not having like recovery individuals coming forward and advocating in such a way that it's like, we have to figure out levels of self-sustainability that is going to allow us to be the bulwark against the storm that's coming. Because the storm that's coming right now is, once again, going to cut back. You're going to get all these different things that are starting to like, well, we can't do that anymore. We can't do that anymore. We have to tweak that. You can't do that for as much time anymore, whatever it is. And that blob known as recovery that has been amorphous and is seeping in and has become, the structure that is recovery has been based upon all these different things, is now going to be drastically altered. And we have no idea kind of the freakonomics of it, where it's like, what does cutting back treatment to 3 months per individual in a given year, what does that do to all the rest of the recovery communities? What happens there? Does that mean that we're going to start seeing recovery communities dwindle overnight? Does that mean we're going to start seeing ODs start shooting through the roof because these people can't get back into treatment? Does that mean that people who they went 3 months in the recovery community and then they tried to do a month stay in the 3/4 house and then they went out and they relapsed and they OD'd, and then the next day they woke up and a couple of days later they OD'd again, which means that they're counted as a double on a stat? Is that what we're going to start seeing? Like, are we going to start seeing statistics get away from us because of this stuff? And I think that the recovery community does itself as a whole, this goes out to everybody that might be listening to this, does itself a disservice that we're not having these conversations right now. That we're not looking at each other and saying, what can we do? What can we do to get past this? How do more people come? Because law of attraction, you can't force people into AA or NA, but how do we make it so that these AA and NA meetings are inclusive, that people are coming here and they feel like, I can find sustained recovery here, instead of feeling like, well, I'm not sure, I don't know. And it could be as simple as like, new person comes to a meeting, Hunter goes, Hunter, you're the greeting person. You're the person that, like, if you see a new person, can you take it upon yourself to come up and, hey, my name is Hunter, welcome to the NA meeting. What's your name? You want to try to get plugged in here? Right. Who knows? Is that what it's going to take? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, as far as you're talking about, this is something I can speak on. So with 12-step groups as themselves, there's a few things that turn people off, and I don't think they're things that could ever go away. So these are the biggest things I hear is either someone is religious. Usually it comes with Christianity. When someone is extremely religious with Christianity and they see the steps and they see it as a religious based, or this is like higher power. It doesn't say God. It doesn't say Jesus. So when they're seeing that can be a big turnoff for them, because they say that is not applicable to my faith. I can't be a part of that. That's one turnoff I see. Another one is the opposite. Someone is atheistic and they see the higher power, they see the God thing, and they're like, I'm out. I don't want that. Nope, not about it. And it's a matter of, once again, judging in ignorance. I'll say I say that a lot, but like judging in ignorance. We don't know anything about this program. We don't know anything about what it's teaching us yet. We've made a decision before we're even involved. And that's nothing. I don't think that the 12-step groups could really make a difference on that. I don't think that could change, because it is a huge part of their program. When you come in, there's a reason why higher power is mentioned in the steps. I mean, if you want to look at AA, which is where it all comes from, it was written by what is his name?
Bill.
What's his last name though? Bill. Is it White?
Yeah.
No. Is it? Okay. It was written by him and someone else. I don't know, but they were from the Oxford group. They were Christian individuals. Originally, it was a Christian-based program, and they decided, I believe it's their editor. It might have been that. It was
their editor to make it more appealing to the masses that they should remove depictions of Christ and they should make it more of a
higher power.
Yeah.
Right. So they made it inclusive. There's reasons it was done like that. So for the Christian group, there's reasons it was like that. And there's nothing unchristian about working the steps. Also, if you're coming in, you're seeing that higher power thing, you will hear it said the higher power doesn't need to be a higher power, like as in an entity, a great
outdoors.
It can be the great outdoors. It can be good.
That's my favorite
direction.
ones. Yeah. I love the ones that are like, they just break it down. I think that's so cool.
Yeah. It can also be the table, it can be the table.
Yeah.
It can be the rooms. It can be the voices of the people there. So I guess if we give it a chance, it has its role to play, but I don't think that the groups themselves can do anything to really like eliminate that, except for you hear it sometimes, the big voices that sit up in there. And if somebody's honest and they're open and they share, like, I don't really like this because it says God. I don't really like this because I feel like it goes against my faith. And there's a guy who knows the literature, who's been in that program for a long time, who can stand up and say, well, actually, this is what you can do. This is how this works for people who think the way you're thinking.
Well, and we need more people like that. I mean, that are, that have a sophisticated look at these different communities. And once again, I'm an ignoramus. I don't know, my butt from a hole in the ground sometimes, but when it comes to it, I keep on seeing these things, and I really am starting to think, like, do we need to start having a lot more honest conversations around these where if we're not identifying this, I'm afraid that everything is going to go to the wayside. There's always, and maybe it's the doomsday in me. Like, there's that fear of like, everything is it's all gonna burn.
The sky is falling.
Yeah, the sky is falling, burn it down to the ground, but I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be like that. I hope it's not. I hope that everything goes swimmingly. We get back up, we keep going. But, for those of you listening today, most of these meditations aren't like this on today, but we've had a fairly long week, and we were just talking, about a bunch of different things that had came up for us over the last couple of weeks. And all is good. At the end of the day, keep on coming back. It works. Walk it out day by day. And if this podcast might have been a little bit over your head or something like that, once again, by no means are all of them like that.
It was over my head as well.
Yeah, right. but what we do encourage you to do is, if you're struggling with addiction, go find a meeting. Reach out, go find a recovery coach, go find a therapist, go find a doctor, a meeting, go find an ally.
Anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, go in that direction. Okay. To a certain extent.
Don't listen to him.
I'm just saying, if you feel uncomfortable going to a meeting, go to a meeting, because you might just grow a little bit.
You might grow just a little bit. With that being said, Hunter, my friend, that wraps it up.
All right.